December 17, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The opening shots of the Battle of the Bulge have already shattered. The morning calm, and the American front lines are disintegrating. Usher for the green troops of the 106th Infantry Division, stationed here to gain experience in what was supposed to be a quiet sector. The German offensive has become a death trap. Two of their regiments, over 7,000 men, are already surrounded and soon to be captured. In the Schnee-Eifel, the vital crossroads town of St. Vith, the gateway to the Meuse River, is now the next target for General Hassel von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army. But as German Panzers and Volksgrenadiers race forward, they are about to encounter a defensive line they never expected. A line manned not by seasoned infantry, but by clerks, cooks, and engineers, the forgotten men of the rear echelon. Pause. This is the story of how office clerks and cooks stopped an SS advance until the ammo ran out. To understand this moment, we must look at the desperate scramble unfolding in the American command. The 106th Infantry Division, the Golden Lions, had only arrived at the front on December 10th, a mere 6 days before the German onslaught. They were untested, and their sector along a ridge called the Schnee-Eifel was dangerously exposed. When the German 18th and 62nd Volksgrenadier Divisions struck pre-dawn on December 16th, they punched through the 106th's flanks, encircling the 422nd and 423rd Infantry Regiments. By the morning of the 17th, the situation was catastrophic. The road from the east, leading from the village of Schönberg straight into St. Vith, was wide open. If the Germans took that road, they would capture the town and outflank the entire Ardennes defense. But there was almost nothing left to stop them. The 106th Division commander, Major General Alan Jones, scraped together every available man. He turned to the 168th Engineer Combat Battalion, a unit of about 500 men who were trained to build bridges and roads, not fight in a life-or-death infantry battle. These were the clerks and cooks of our story, carpenters, electricians, and construction workers who had never fired a bazooka in combat. Alongside them were a handful of men from the 81st Engineer Battalion and a platoon from the 89th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. Their orders were simple but seemingly suicidal. Move east on the Schönberg Road. Find the enemy and hold them at all costs. The engineers moved out at around 10:30 hours, marching into the freezing fog that blanketed the Ardennes. They deployed about 2 miles east of St. Vith, along the edge of a pine forest on a ridge overlooking the road from Schönberg. The men were armed primarily with rifles and a few machine guns. They had almost no heavy weapons, and crucially, a large percentage of their machine gunners had been sent to schools and were not present. Those who remained were inexperienced, a fact that would cost them dearly. They dug in as best they could, the frozen ground resisting their entrenching tools. The temperature hovered around 0 degrees. By noon, they spotted them. German patrols, the advanced scouts of the 18th Volksgrenadier Division, began filtering through the woods. These were followed by the main force, not just Volksgrenadiers, but elements of the Führer-Begleit Brigade, a well-equipped armored unit meant to spearhead the capture of St. Vith. The Americans opened fire, and for a few precious hours they held. The combination of the dense forest and the determined, if inexperienced, resistance slowed the German timetable. But as the afternoon wore on, the pressure became unbearable. Then, at around 1600 hours, the situation changed. The Germans brought up armored support. From around a bend in the road, the distinctive rumble of tank tracks could be heard. A column of German panzers, likely Panzer IVs or assault guns from the supporting armored elements, began to advance directly on the engineer positions. The clerks and cooks, huddled in their shallow foxholes, now faced the prospect of armored vehicles they had no means to stop. Their rifle rounds pinged harmlessly off the sloping steel. The machine guns were silenced, one by German high-explosive shells. The crisis came at the point where the road crested the ridge. The German armor, supported by infantry, began a final push to overrun the American line. The engineers, outnumbered and outgunned, watched in horror as the panzers rolled closer. Their position was being systematically destroyed. Casualties mounted. The men who had been cooks and clerks just days before were now being cut down by machine gun fire and point-blank tank rounds. The line was buckling. It seemed that nothing could stop the German advance from crashing through to St. Vith. Pause. This was the moment when the entire defense of the town hung by a thread. But unknown to the engineers, help had arrived. Earlier that day, General Middleton, commander of 8th Corps, had ordered the 7th Armored Division to race south from Holland to reinforce St. Vith. The lead elements of Combat Command B, under Brigadier General Bruce Clark, were rushing toward the sound of the guns. At the most critical moment, as the German panzers were about to break through, the first tanks of the 7th Armored Division arrived on the scene. These were not clerks or cooks. These were seasoned armored crewmen in their M4 Sherman tanks. They rolled directly into the fray, engaging the German panzers in a sudden, violent tank duel. The surprise appearance of American armor threw the Germans off balance. The Shermans, using the terrain and the fading light, knocked out the lead German tanks, blocking the road and stalling the enemy assault. Paused the desperate stand of the engineers had bought the crucial hours needed for the 7th Armored to get into the fight. The clerks and cooks, though shattered and depleted, had done their job. They had delayed the enemy just long enough. The fighting on the Schönberg Ridge was brutal. The 168th Engineer Battalion suffered heavy losses, with many of its inexperienced machine gunners among the killed. But their sacrifice, alongside the timely arrival of the 7th Armored Division, gave the defenders of St. Vith a fighting chance. For the next 4 days, from December 17th to the 21st, a makeshift force under General Clark, including the remnants of the 106th, the Engineers, and the 7th Armored, held St. Vith against overwhelming odds. They were finally ordered to withdraw on December 21st, but by then they had disrupted the entire German timetable. The capture of St. Vith, scheduled for 1800 hours on December 17th, had been delayed by 4 critical days. That delay blunted the German offensive and helped seal the fate of Hitler's last gamble in the Aisne. West, the stand of the clerks, cooks, and engineers on that freezing road east of St. Vith remains one of the most heroic and forgotten chapters of the Battle of the Bulge.